So, my name is Jonathan Stavsky. I'll be introducing this keynote. But first, I'd like to say just a few words about Chana, since it seems that everyone else is doing so. So I had the fortune of joining the department this year, but I've also had the misfortune of joining the department this year. For almost missing the opportunity to have Chana as my active colleague. So nevertheless, despite our short acquaintance or short personal acquaintance, Chana's name certainly precedes her, and over the years I've been hearing about her unflagging support for the humanities and her very active role in promoting Yiddish scholarship in Israel and around the world. And I referred to the near misfortune, perhaps, of not having Chana as my colleague, but still in the very sort of brief time that we did occupy the same department together. I got one piece of golden advice that I sort of would like to share with everyone. So I presented a paper of mine at a departmental seminar last year, and Chana asked me, so what sort of story are you telling? And this just struck me, the idea that sort of, even as scholars, we're here to tell a story. And the story has to have its own coherence and interest, not just a sort of abstract argument, but a story that's, and I think that if you look at her book, Call It English, which I read in part when I was preparing for my job, for my interview, it really felt like I was reading a story with all of the right footnotes and sources and scholarship, but a book that's simply interesting to read. And as someone who deals with a very different period, medieval English literature, but one that's nevertheless characterized by multilingualism, I could find a lot in that book that spoke to me as a scholar and also as a person. So I'm hoping that this near misfortune won't be a misfortune at all, and that we'll have Chana still taking an active part in our department and in Israeli academia in general after her retirement. And sometimes retirement is the best time to produce high-quality work when you're free of other obligations. So with that being said, I will fulfill my duty and introduce Professor David Roskies. So he's chair of Yiddish literature and culture and professor of Jewish literature at the Jewish Theological Seminary, a member of the American Academy for Jewish Research and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, a former Guggenheim Fellow, and since 2013 he has also served as a visiting professor of Yiddish Studies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Professor Roskies is the author of 9 books devoted to Eastern European Jewry on topics ranging from Holocaust literature to Ashkenazic folklore, as well as the memoir Yiddish Lands. He's also the co-founder of Proof Texts, a journal of Jewish literary history. Since 1998, he has served as editor-in-chief of the New Yiddish Library series published by Yale University Press. The title of his keynote is Yiddish Orality in an Age of Digital Reproduction. Thank you. Professor Roskies.
Like everyone else in this room, the debt I owe to Chana cannot be repaid in the course of a single day or a week or a year. How do you thank someone for her personal presence, for being the person that she is? Chana is the embodiment of excellence, whether as a scholar, a teacher, a critical responder, a colleague, a friend, or a thought partner. Chana's presentation of self is never less than exemplary. Not because she's a woman and women have to be perfect in order to earn the world's respect. not because she was born in Munich to survive her parents and therefore must compensate their losses, but because, to paraphrase my own mother, English muss gehen schön ungetan. Remember, you are a standard bearer of English and American. When in the public eye, be sure to wear your party clothes. You are also the Israeli cultural ambassador, so knock their socks off. I call my project Call It Jew Speak, in honor of Chana Worth Nesher. It previewed in Poetics Today in a special issue on modern Yiddish literary studies that Chana conceptualized and guest edited. Have you ever wondered why, when you appear under Chana's aegis in any forum, whether in print, as a visiting lecturer, or as a fellow committee member, you always come out looking good? Have you ever considered why that is so? Let me suggest that it's because Chana's been working tirelessly behind the scenes, away from the public eye, to set you up for success. That's why she gets up at 4:30 in the morning. Now, English, as it happens, lacks an operative term for this extraordinary trait of hers, but in Yiddish it's called zu farginen, which has entered colloquial Hebrew as lefargen. I owe my presence here today and whatever contributions I have made to Yiddish studies in Israel to Chana. Thanks to her, Tel Aviv University was my first academic home here in Israel in 1996 and 2002, and for many summers at the Goldreich Summer Institute for Yiddish Language and Literature, not to speak of the various colloquia and conferences where somehow, miraculously, Yiddish was always given prominence. Thanks to her, every July, the halls of Webb are alive to the sound of Yiddish. Since 2013, my reason for spending half of every year in Israel is the Inter-University MA program in Yiddish Literature and Culture, headquartered at Tel Aviv University. Who do you think has been holding that consortium together? And how do you think an appointment was made in Yiddish Literary and Cultural Studies at Tel Aviv, where a group of colleagues is making ready to set her up for success? Remember, Yiddish was not Chana's day job. Now, where a story begins determines in large measure how it will end. My story then begins at the Victor Talking Machine Company in Camden, New Jersey. It was here in 1915 that a recent arrival to America, the beloved Yiddish humorist Sholem Aleichem, came to test record his most celebrated comedy monologue, Wenn ich bin Rothschild. I would like to believe that his master's voice, a huge stained glass logo of Nipper, the mixed breed terrier listening intently to a wind-up cylinder phonograph, brought a smile to Sholem Aleichem's rapidly aging face. Judging from his choice of repertoire, I have every reason to believe that Sholem Aleichem had high hopes for selling his own voice and a keen sense of his American Jewish audience. Rather than choose a greenhorn narrator from his most recent monologues to parody the actual creolized speech of the American Yiddish street, Sholem Aleichem chose a highly stylized specimen of unalloyed Yiddish, far removed in time and place from the New World. The speaker in Sholem Aleichem's signature monologue is your typically broke Jewish breadwinner whom he captures at the most precarious moment of the week. Classes are over, the boys have been sent home, and there's not a kopek in the kitty for his wife to prepare for the Sabbath. The Melamed's first item of business is to get her off his back. It's a tortuous hermeneutic process that is perfectly captured by the rise and fall of his voice. So, in addition to the familiar setting, which makes for a playful, indeed poignant spoof on the theme of Jewish sacred poverty, what immediately situates the monologue within the epicenter of Yiddishkeit are the intonation, which mimics how men and boys study the Talmud out loud, and their use of such learned locutions as Reishis Chochmeh, first of all, V'hoshenis, second of all. Bringing the monologue home beyond this arrested moment in semi-sacred time, the intonation and the diction, are the music and rhythm of the Ukrainian Yiddish dialect, which the nameless Melamed shares with the illustrious author. Their speech is full of such colloquial expressions as dul naspodik, to annoy, hakel bakel makel flekel, this, that, and the other, a folk parody of Hakol Mikol Kol from the blessings after the meal. And if we listen carefully, we can also pick up the palatalized consonants, as in the words keshenye or kneln. Even at 75 cents, which was a king's ransom in 1915, this 10-inch 78 RPM demo disc is a huge bargain. So listen carefully.
Wenn ich bin Rothschild, am Monolog von Shalom Aleichem. Wenn ich bin Rothschild, wenn ich soll sein Rothschild, erstens wollte ich gegeben mein Jidene Adreierl, als kommt der Schabbat, soll sie hoben bei sich in Keshenja Adreierl, es soll mir nicht denken, es verdeckt. Und zweitens, sicher ein Gestief, wollte ich sie weggegeben, den ganzen mit der Kammer, mit dem Kehler, mit dem Stall, mit dem Stellachl, mit dem Spejarni, mit Achselbacken, nicht gefleckt. Sich wollte ich übergelassen, nur ein Geider auf die Knell, und die Sibirike wollte ich weggegeben hier mit der Kirche, Nadjier, Backjier, Kochjier, Brutjier, Brennjier, und all die schwarze Jürgen.
How Sholem Aleichem's recorded performance sounded to its target audience, recent arrivals from Kasrilivka and Yehupitz, is very different from how it sounds to us. For one thing, to paraphrase Kafka, we understand much less Yiddish than we think we do. That is why, making a virtue of deficiency, we turn to Walter Benjamin's The Work of Art in an Age of Mechanical Reproduction, and categorize any such recording as an artistic artifact. Following Benjamin, the 10-inch disc with the purple label becomes for us an emblem of multiple loss. It bespeaks the commodification of culture and the irreparable break with the fabric of tradition. Deconstructed, the 10-inch demo is our master's voice at a triple remove. First, it is the living author sitting in front of a microphone instead of a live audience. Second, his larger-than-life presence has been cut down to marketable size, into a mere comedy monologue of the old school. And third, the test recording was issued in memory of the late author, sometime after his death in May 1916. These fragments, barely a soundbite in length, are all that remains of Sholem Aleichem's recitational art. As our title suggests, today's lecture presentation was written with Benjamin's classic essay firmly in mind. But because today is a celebration of Hannah Worth Nesher's career and we are following the narrative arc of Call It English, we need not be seduced by Benjamin's melancholy or dazzled by his dialectical mindset. Yiddish orality, as preserved on recordings, airwaves, and in cyberspace, do not conjure up a litany of loss. Rather, they bespeak the blessings of multilingualism. They exemplify the reinvention of Jewish culture in modern times. Yet, Benjamin has left us something indispensable to work with, a term of art at once indeterminate and highly qualitative, the term aura. So when we ask what survives the ravages of mechanical reproduction, our answer will be the aura of orality. On balance, then, the 10-inch disc embodies much more than it alienates. First, Wenn ich bin Rothschild is vintage Jew speak, a highly compressed and stylized form of written as spoken transcript of supposedly traditional members of Jewish society speaking in their own voice. Precisely because the Melamed occupies the bottom rung of the clerical hierarchy, he is not only perfectly positioned to provide a pauper's view of the whole shtetl infrastructure, which no amount of philanthropy, even from the real Rothschild, could ever rehabilitate, but his speech is totally unfiltered and therefore authentic. Why should he censor his utopian reverie and his repetitive, redundant, additive, circular, solipsistic, and proverbial manner of speak if there's no one listening anyway? He's communing only with himself. Second, through Sholem Aleichem's monologue, the listener returns to the shtetl imaginary, in which the speech habits of the folk are an essential key to their character. The monologue captures our hapless breadwinner in that liminal moment between the weekday and the Sabbath, when the discrepancy between dream and reality is in sharpest relief. The only way for our paterfamilias to problem solve is rhetorically, through his lifelong habit of biblical interpretation and Talmudic analysis. What is a teacher of sacred texts, if not someone who dreams in sing-song? In no time, we enter into the Sabbath of his mind, all the more precious here in America, where almost everyone is forced to work on the Sabbath. And were that not enough, we hear the voice of the great humorist in the recording studio speaking to us live when he was still alive. Sholem Aleichem's undying popularity proved that America was the golden Medina when it came to the sound of Yiddish, and no self-respecting Yiddish actor would fail to add him to their repertoire. As competing voices who began their careers on the Yiddish stage playing for the Vilna troupe, the exemplar of the Yiddish art theater movement, it stands to reason that both Noach Nachbush and Herz Grossbart learned to perform Wenn ich bin Rothschild. Nachbush first issued it as a separate disc in 1952, making sure to advertise his version as arrangiert, which means adapted and rendered. This gave him license to abbreviate the text and to expand its theatricality. Nachbush is obviously playing for laughs. He actually begins the monologue with the Melamed laughing at his own joke, and greatly exaggerates the rise and fall of his intonation. This last changes both the character of the Melamed and the nature of the performance. The more overtly Jewish Nachbush makes him sound, the more he comes across as effeminate. What we're hearing is the emasculated voice of the Talmudist, who can assert himself the only way he knows how, rhetorically. By exceeding the expressive range of your average henpecked husband, something that Sholem Aleichem's performance was careful not to do, Nachbush turns the Melamed's monologue into a set piece designed to foreground the actor and not the character.
Gewalt, Gieden. Wo soll ich Vater nehmen 3 Rubel auf Schabes? Wo bin ich, Rothschild? Hey, wenn ich bin Rothschild, für ich einer Minneger Weib soll Tomit haben, was ich 3 auf Schabes. Oh, wenn ich bin Rothschild, kief ich die Stube mit alle 3 Chadorim. Jeder nehme ich für sich, ich soll können lernen mit meinen Talmidim. Mich haie nicht Fosches, man bedarf nicht trachten, wo nimmt man auf Schabes. Nur wollte ich da umgeben, gucken ein bisschen unser Kasrilewski. Das erste bin ich mir nader an einem Dach von alten bisschen Mädels. Dennoch boi ich hab ich Kocheule mit Bettlach, mit Doktoren, mit Refues, mit Jaichlach alle Tag für die Kranke. Und nach Hevre mal bis herum, morgen mit Kindern, und nicht herumgehen mit die Pupkis in Drößen.
Herz Grossbart was in a class by himself. Grossbart dedicated his life to the stagecraft of the Voltkonzert, the solo reading. He performed on a bare stage, seated at a small table with a reading lamp and no microphone. His cultural project was to create a highbrow recitational art that placed the newest written as spoken voices in modern Yiddish literature center stage. Eliezer Steinberg, Itzik Manger, Aleph Lutzky, and Moshe Nadir. Only after winning over his secular urbane audience with the best that contemporary Yiddish culture had to offer did Grossbart circle back to the classical repertoire of Peretz and Sholem Aleichem. Grossbart is the first reciter on record to place a premium on enunciation and elocution. With its deliberated rhythm, Wenn ich bin Rothschild has a writerly feel to it. Here, as elsewhere in Grossbart's performance, there is no attempt made to preserve any specific Yiddish dialect.
Wenn ich bin Rothschild, a Monolog von a Kasrilevker Melamed, Beis die Rebetzin hat ihm einmal in a Donnerstag im Mund auf Schabbes und hat nicht gehabt. Oi, wenn ich soll sein Rothschild. Trefft, was ich tu. Reisches Chochme, fier ich einer Minnig, als a Weib soll Tomit haben, was ich a Dreierl. Richtig, sie soll versporen, dullen als Podik, als kommt guter Donnerstag in seine Stoff Schabbes. Wahrscheinlich kaufe die Schabbestige kaputte, oder nein, dem Weibs Ketzen im Burnus, lass sie aufhören picken in den Kopf rein, als es ihr kalt. Und Käufer weg die dosige Stube im Ganzen mit alle 3 Chadorim, mit der Kammer, mit der Spizanne, mit dem Keller, mit dem Beudem, mit Hackel, Backel, Mickel, Fleckel. Lass sie nicht sagen, als sie eng. Nadja weg 2 Chadorim. Kocht ihr, backt ihr, wascht ihr, brockt ihr und lass mich zur Ruhe. Ich soll können knellen mit meinen Talmiden mit reinem Kopf. Nicht doch in deiges Parnosse, man darf nicht klären, wo nimmt man auf Schabbes,
The most obvious difference in Grossbart's delivery is that he slows things down. Now, you might think that he does so in order to achieve his elocutionary precision. Only when need be, as we will have occasion to hear later on, Grossbart can recite at breakneck speed without sacrificing a single syllable. On a personal note, I took private lessons with Grossbart in Yiddish elocution in the 1960s. He dropped me after the 3rd class. For Grossbart, as opposed to Nachbush, the source of Sholem Aleichem's humor is not so much the Melamed's affect as his mental gymnastics. What's funny is the mock analytic mode of his thinking, how the Melamed zeroes in on each economic shortfall and then proceeds to conjure it away. Thus, for example, Grossbart stops at Oder nee, on second thought, that is, rather than redeem my Sabbath kaftan from the local moneylender, let me buy back my wife's catskin cloak instead. Grossbart's slower delivery signifies something else in addition. It's his way of separating high comedy from low. We aren't listening to Gigan and Schumacher. Sholem Aleichem deserves our absolute attention to every turn of phrase and rhetorical flourish. Yiddish has a classical repertoire that demands recitational excellence. Yiddish muss gehen, schön angetan. Now, when the Victor Talking Machine Company issued a recording of Sholem Aleichem's voice, it was banking on his recent death to supply the aura. The death of Manya Leib in 1953, at the age of 70, was an awful awakening to the critic Abraham Tabachnik. Was it possible, he asked himself, that Manya Leib's voice had been erased forever? If we allowed this to happen to a founder of Die Junge, the so-called young guard of American Yiddish poets, then there was no time to lose. So Tabachnik bought himself a reel-to-reel tape recorder and initiated a project that he called the Voice of the Yiddish Poet. Seeing as the reel-to-reel tape recorder was a portable and capacious medium, Tabachnik conducted in-depth interviews with some 20-odd poets, so that future generations would be able to hear them both recite the poems of their own choosing and hear the whole unfiltered interview, background noises and all. Sometimes the very absence of aura, the cadence of a casual conversation, could bring a voice to life. Listening to Tabachnik's interviews, now available through the Yiddish Book Center's Francis Brand online Yiddish audio library and through Merchav, the online archive of the National Library of Israel, it is easy to recognize who wrote in meter and who in free verse, who was reclusive and who had a flair for the dramatic. Also noticeable is that unlike their American English counterparts, Yiddish poets were not wedded to a single, studied, monotone, understated performance style. So, while Yosef Rolnick, the oldest of the Junge whom Tabachnik manages to capture on tape, is wooden in his delivery and seems hobbled by his metrical schemes, the younger and more experimental poets like Yankiv Gladstein, Aleph Leolis, and Meir Sticker are naturals in front of the microphone. The latter obviously enjoyed much more exposure, as evidenced by other of their public readings, whether at the poetry series at the 92nd Street Y in New York, or at the Jewish Public Library in Montreal, where my Landsmann Chaim Ostreger, a cutter in a glove factory by day, initiated the largest recorded archive of the spoken Yiddish word. Tabachnik's selection, however, suffered from a strong male bias. By the early 60s, if to judge by the prestigious poetry series at the 92nd Street Y, women poets had achieved parity with the men. In his recent book, Survivors and Exiles, Jens Schwartz mentions readings at the 92nd Street Y by Rosa Gutmann, Rochel Korn, Kadja Molodowski, Chave Rosenfarb, and Rachel Veprinsky. The age of mechanical and readily accessible reproduction gave new aura to the living voice of the Yiddish poet and to the natural sound of modern Yiddish verse. What it opens up for us is the extraordinary range of what sounds natural. Itzik Manger gained instant celebrity at Tlomatsky 13, the Association of Jewish Writers and Journalists in Warsaw, for the seemingly effortless delivery of his ballads, which he recited by heart. Interviewed by Tabachnik in 1955, but also recorded at a CBS studio in Israel shortly before he died, Manger can be heard turning the pages and even on occasion adjusting his dentures. But there is no mistaking the cadence of this born-again folk bard and the Yiddish of someone who was salt of the Bessarabian earth. Here is Manger reciting the opening stanzas of his most famous poem, which sounds like a song even without the music.
Auf dem Weg steht ein Bäum, steht eingebogen. Alle Vögel von dem Bäum sehnen sich zu fliegen. Drei Misrach, drei Marev, in der Reschken Durem. In dem Bäum gelost allein, heftiger fahren Sturm. Sog ich zu der Mama, Herr, soll's mich noch nicht stören, will ich Mama 1 und 2 bald auf Vögel werden. Ich will sitzen auf dem Bäum und will ihm verwegen, über den Winter mit der Trist, mit der schönen Nigen. Sog die Mama, nötig Kind, und sie weint mit Tränen, kennst Heule auf dem Bäum ihr verfreuen werden.
The next generation of Yiddish poets whom Tabachnik embraced were the introspectivists, for whom free rhythm became the hallmark of poetic truth. If two poems shared the same rhythm, proclaimed the In sich Manifesto, then one of them was lying. A woman might be admitted to their ranks if, in addition to free verse, she also brought free love and open eroticism to the table. Thus was born Celia Dropkin's persona as the circus lady, also translated as the acrobat, courting death, embracing failure in an intimate, experiential, embodied poetry more radically personal, edgier, and more unbridled than even her male colleagues had attempted. Yet, however bold her imagery on the printed page, however much her repetitions evoke a trance-like feeling, they are nothing when compared to the sound of her voice. One day, in the 1940s, at a time when Dropkin no longer appeared in public, had virtually stopped writing poetry and had turned to painting instead, she went for a walk in Coney Island. Besides the cyclone and the Wonder Wheel, other special attractions were the 24 voiceograph machines located in arcades all over the island. It would have cost her 25 cents, the price of a double feature, to record her voice, and for a little extra to have a personalized label with her name on it. Recorded at 78 RPM, the technology was basically the same as in Sholem Aleichem's day. Had she been planning this for a long time, or did she enter the booth on the spur of the moment? I suspect that Dropkin's experiment in the culture of the selfie was premeditated, because one of the poems she recorded, Zepralte Hand von Beimer, Outspread Arms of Trees, could be fully appreciated only as a performance piece. This is not a poem. It's an incantation, an invocation of the tree as lover. It is orality let loose. Whatever wellsprings of poetic inspiration it draws upon, they are neither recognizably Yiddish nor Yiddish American. Nature poetry was not especially favored by the introspectivists. Perhaps it taps into Dropkin's deep roots in modern Russian poetry and culture. Be that as it may, in Dropkin's breathless delivery, we hear the voices of other women poets still to come. We hear Sylvia Plath and Dalia Ravikovich also walking the tightrope of desire and despair.
Ze praat de hand van Bemer, ze praat de hand van Licht und ein bläuer Gesicht. Ze trug sie durch ein Park, auf Spiegeln schwarz zu werden, durch Nacht von Regen. Bemer und Wahn, in Spiel von nassen Strahlen. Der Park ist voll mit Strahlen, mit Milchwegen, Kametten, mit gildenen Ziretten, mit gildenen Gewerben, von Räte grüne Spinnen, von treffeklichten Rät, von treffeklichten Grün, mit Regen und mit Leben, was patscht in der Maschine. Der Park ist wie ein Saal, mit dunkelem Parkett, mit Bemer Kandelabren, was zwischen sehr Licht, mit gelbem Otterlicht, ein Otterkarneval, und Tänze und Kapitän, in dicken Glee, von schwarzen Kandelabren, von alle Farben, nach schwarz und golden grün, nach schwarz und golden Rät, und du in der Maschine, bleich wie Tät. Zu prallt Hand von Bemer, zu prallt Hand von Licht, und ein bläuer Gesicht, und ein Hand wie Bemer, und ein Hand wie Licht.
Rhyme is a major player in the music of Dropkin's poem, as it is in the later poetry of the leading introspectivists, Aleph Laelis and Gladstein, for example. Were it not for the rhyme, Laelis's The God of Israel would read almost like prose. Written in 1943, it captures the fundamental shift in the poetics of the introspectivists from what Itai Zutra calls idiosyncratic universalism to vernacular parochialism. Tabachnik had made this shift the centerpiece of his post-war manifesto, Tradition and Revolt in Yiddish Poetry, in which he argued that the more modernist Yiddish poetry became, the more it was able to reclaim the immediate severed past. Indeed, you can hear the cultural self-confidence in Laelis's voice as he recites this poem to Tabachnik, slowly and deliberately, a poem with the heaviest overlay of Ashkenazi Hebrew of any in Laelis's oeuvre. The Hebraic diction underscores the poem's bold and original thesis. Compared to Christian Europe, how rich the Jews of Ashkenaz are in their material poverty. The Harshav translation captures some of the rhyme and none of the Hebrew. The God of Israel is not rich. I saw the Sistine Chapel, Notre Dame, the Cathedral of Cologne. You can feast your eyes on them. You can enjoy. The God of Israel is stingy. He won't fill his museums with statues, paintings, altars, thrones, purple gowns, three-tiered crowns. He does not wish to live in a palais. The Jewish Museum has a modest display. A Hanukkah lamp, a curtain, a scroll, a spice box, tefillin, a pointed hand, a menorah, a Torah crown, tools for circumcision, and an old ancient manuscript, then another manuscript, and another manuscript, entangled, bound, locked together, letters in love with letters. Laelis loved this poem so much that when he got to the end of this epic list of Judaic treasures, he playfully added an extra syllable to the print version, saying, una farzeitiker ksaviyad, and an old, very, very, very old parchment, which rhymes with yad, a Torah pointer. He luxuriates on the words farzeitiker ksaviyad because his real point of pride is about to come. A ksaviyad is just another word for manuscript. As Judaism is a text-based religion, so textuality is the playing field of modernist poetry. A triple rhyme drives this message home. Manuskript, verknüpft, entangled, verliebt, in love.
Der Gott von Yisroel. Der Gott von Yisroel ist nicht reich. Ich hab gesehen, die Sistiner Kaplize, die Notre Dame, dem Dom von Kell. Es ist du, das euch zu loben, zu gefallen. Der Gott von Yisroel ist karg. Will nicht umfüllen sein Museum mit Statuen, mit Gemälden, Altaren, Trogstuhl, purpurne Kleider, 3 goldige Kräunen. Will in kein Paleien nicht wohnen. Der jüdische Museum hat winzig Verscheunen. A Hanukkah-Lampel, a Bräuches, a Megille, a Psumenbixel, a Twillensäcke, a Jad, a Meneure, Käser Teure, Marschieren Vermiele und a verzeitiger, verzeitiger Xaviat. Noch ein Manuskript und noch ein Manuskript. Gewickelt, gebunden, verknippt, Oisius in Oisius verliebt.
No less authoritative and natural was the voice of Avram Sutzkever, who by 1943 had become the poet laureate of the Vilna Ghetto, and, like Laeolus, the Yiddish poet whom he most admired, began writing verse that was meant to be heard and not only read. In the Vilna Ghetto, moreover, where Yiddish was the lingua franca, lectures and recitals were the main venue of cultural discourse. Here is Sutzkever reciting his ballad of the plundered shoes, in which he transmutes the murder of his mother into a bizarre supernatural encounter of the living with the dead. Even without knowing when and where the poem was written, Sutzkever's declamatory style, so heavily indebted to the Russian tradition, transports the listener to another time and place.
A Wogenschicht, die Räder jogen, was bringen sie mit sich? Sie bringen mir a Wogen mit zappeln dicke Schicht. Der Wogen wie a Chuppe in oventigen Glanz, die Schicht a volle Kuppe wie Menschen in a Tanz. A Hasene, a Jontef, sie hat mich wer verblendet, die Schicht a Säune nonnte, aufs Nei ich hab derkennt. Es klappen die Abzassen, wohin, wohin, wohin? Von alte Wilner Gassen, mit treibt uns in Berlin.
What makes a language sound young? Is it the declamatory style? Is it the voice quality, the pitch, or the content? Does lowering your voice make you sound older and raising your voice make you sound shrewish? And what does it sound like to speak like a Jew? We've already heard that quasi-chanting is a signifier of Jew speak because it mimics the way that Jewish sacred texts are studied out loud. But pitch is something else. Returning to Herz Grossbart, the master of the solo performance, the normal pitch of his voice may seem effete and borderline effeminate to our ear. But it was Grossbart who was the harbinger of the new to an urbane East European audience hungry for the latest Yiddish sound. It was the sound of jazz made in the USA. And this is the second handout that you have, if you can follow it. Jazz was one of several improvisations by the American Yiddish poet Aleph Lutzky, which he would perform to great acclaim at solo readings. Lutzky never returned to Europe after emigrating in 1914, other than to fight in the Battle of Verdun. So it was left to Grossbart and other Yiddish actors to take his show on the road. And since Lutzky died before Tabachnik got hold of him, Grossbart's performance is the only recording we have. Jazz is all rhyme and syncopated rhythm, a madcap mixture of sense and sound, old world and new, from Kol Nidre to Aida, instruments and animals, idiom and neologism, alle Vielen, malle Geren, alle Teute Vielen wären, atze Brask von alle Zeiten, atze Broisk von alle Weiten, which means everyone wants a second run, the dead all want to live again, hear the furious sound of all the ages, the seething of all the reaches. Okay, here goes. Grossbart.
Jazz! Quietsche-Ritsche, Fiedel-Schmiedel, Piano-Poik, Klappel-Ploppel, Steckel-Fleckel, Zitter-Zertel, Zappel-Gleckel, Tatzen-Tatze-Rafte, Tatzen-Akkurat-Akrobat, Tanze, Butzen, Batzen, nur verspätet, Punkt, zum Takt, Bräus und Brennung gar noch Liebe. Weiß, am Mädel lacht dich heus, gib ihr Geld, soll sie nehmen und sie wehen sich auf ihr Scheuß, so. Dreh sich heus ein Peikel, Poike, täuschen, stößt Tatzen zu, du bist dort zu machen Tummel, du bist dort zu stehen, Ruh, so, sing, pfeif, kling, mit die Zähne kritzerets, mit den Blicken sind sie fleits, gib a Rev und gib a Riss, nehm a Kuschen, gib a Biss, sag's a Wundreus a Krei,
Wo 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 wo. Grobe Trube gib a Seifz. Wo 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 wo. Nicht geklogen, nicht gelachen, Goranaya mach von Sachen. Kloge Lachke, Lachgewinke, von Kolnidre, von Aide. Wie es fängt auf sich an Niger. Wie ein Steiger Tiger, wie es pfeift der Bahn zum Himmel, wie ein Wind die Wälder wildert, wie ein Poppe grober Pröppelt, wie ein Schicke sich de wackelt, wie ein Kuh fällt mir hucket, wie mir schreit im Puste Fässern, wie ein Dunner größt sich größer. Saviruche, wilde Wuche, Mensch und Chaie, ein Mischpoche, Leib und Lemmel, ein Maroche. Völker weinen in die Länder, Chais weinen in die Wälder, Wegeschrei von allen Sprachen, stummer Zar von allen Sachen, alle willen malegieren, alle Teute willen wehren, a Zebrask von allen Zeiten, a Zebreus von allen Weiten, Traske, Maske, Flaske, Laske, Krachramatten und Kanonen, Tresel, Leerten, Tresel, Heise, Gicher, Heinte, Gicher, Morgen, Schneller, Säge, mit die Weise, Obenbahnen, Untenbahnen, Submarinen, Aeroplanen, Riederräder, Barabahnen, zusammen, Radio ruft darunter Marsen. Welten rückt sich so zusammen. Heche, Saxophon, Stiffon, Schiffel, sich Trombon, Trombetrube, Obenmond, Flatter, Fleckel, Viafon, Klingel, Glecken und der Mond, Schall, Strahl, Trompet, Sogon, Metamol von Onebon, Jazz.
Isn't that incredible? I can personally attest that this was the showstopper at every performance. I heard, growing up, I heard Grossbard recite this at the same speed as he recorded it, and he never made a mistake. Okay? So you're hearing the real performance. Now, in live performance, back then, Grossbard was able to collapse all spatial boundaries. His audience could be sitting in the Jewish Community Center in Czernowitz and be transported to Greenwich Village. As Lutzky says, Radio ruft darunter Marsen, Welten ruckt sich zusammen, which I think means radio calling Mars, hey worlds, get your act together. But in recorded performance, as we've just heard, Grossbard collapses all temporal boundaries. Suddenly, we, the contemporary listeners, are transported back to a time when Yiddish culture was at the cutting edge, seizing on the new with no holds barred. It wasn't only by means of jazz that the new Yiddish sound could be disseminated. In America, as of September 6, 1923, it was also through the frequencies of ethnic radio stations. Yiddish orality, heretofore a cultural sideline, was suddenly thrust front and center as the ubiquitous radio set split ethnicity off from religion and made the consumption of native foods and residual loyalty to one's native tongue the main expression of one's identity.
Shapiro's kosher wine.
Shapiro's wine, den Fleischland in den Fässern, ist dick fein, als wir kennen, schneiden nicht am Messer.
So besides Yiddish advertising jingles like the one you just heard for Shapiro's wine, the radio gave rise to new forms of ethnic performance, to Victor Packer's Amateur Stunde, to Nachum Stutzkov's Jewish family dramas, to the Grammeister, Zvi Schooler, who revived the performance style and greatly expanded the repertoire of the Badchen, the traditional Jewish rap artist, which is the subject of a brilliant study by Beatrice Lang. All this and more is being systematically digitized on the Yiddish Radio Project under the directorship of Henry Sapoznik of klezmer music fame. Just as the so-called golden age of Yiddish radio was ending in the 1950s, there began a race against time to preserve the full expanse of Yiddish orality and cultural practice in Western and Eastern Ashkenaz, which Hitler and Stalin had all but obliterated. Working solo, the ethnomusicologist Ruth Rubin began recording everything from Cheder lore to the sound of the town crier calling Jews to morning prayers. One elderly informant rehearsed for her a counting out rhyme that he remembered from Cheder to determine who was it. Like children's lore everywhere, it preserved a much older stratum of the culture. In this case, a learned technique called concatenation, whereby fragments of unrelated phrases are strung together to humorous effect. Adapted for play, the one who's it is the Leman al Goylem, the clay fool, at the end of the word chain.
Uter, Tuter, Talmen, Tute. Tuter, Talmen,
Herrisch Salmen. Salmen Herrisch, Boim Kerisch. Kerisch Boim, Gewirre Schleim. Schleim Gewirre, Geld Aschire. Aschire Geld, Eulen Feld. Feld Eulen, Leimene Geulem. Belfe Gehelfe zu knackte Kneidlich, Sake pure für alle Mädlich. Oi, dem Reppen spottig brennt, soll brennen wie a Feier, soll wissen Geld zu teilen, soll wissen Geld zu scheinen, soll wissen mit dem Wab zu weinen.
Sorry, it's something else. Never mind. Okay, you get the feeling. It's an ethnic recording. Okay, here's something else. It's equally parodic. I mixed it. It's another recording. Never mind. I can't go back now. I don't have enough time. Anyway, here is the Schulklapper, the beadle, the shamus, who knocks on the shutters at dawn to call the faithful to prayer by repeating the same 15 words, 11 of which are in Ashkenazi Hebrew. Holy people, he cries, arise and go to serve the Lord. For this I was created. Get up. How long can you lie there?
Am Kodai steht auf, wenn geht lavoi des Aboirei, ki lekach nozati, utzei lad musait fishka.
Working with a small team of dedicated, academically trained co-workers, Uriel Weinreich set out in 1958 to do the impossible, to produce a face-to-face descriptive study of European Jewry based on detailed recorded interviews with elderly immigrants, at least one sample informant per locality. In Weinreich's usage, the term Ashkenaz signified an autonomous, autochthonous, internally coherent yet regionally diverse civilization that stretched from the Baltic to the Black Sea, from Alsace-Lorraine to Yekaterinoslav. Knowing that this was the 11th hour to conduct a reconstructive project on such a vast scale, he set out to create a language and culture atlas of Ashkenazic Jewry, that is, to map the spread and linguistic patterns of Yiddish dialects, but also to preserve what Stephen Lowenstein would later call the little tradition, the portable culture of European Jewry, learned through family and community, the whole body of minhag and steger, which mediates Jewish religion for the majority of Jews, which is place-specific and infinitely variable. In short, not the culture of the elite, but the culture of the common folk. The archival voices preserved in the Language and Culture Atlas of Ashkenazic Jewry, now relocated in Germany, where all the tapes have been digitized, are on a website called ADIS, Witness, which stands for Yiddish Evidence Documented in European Societies. It offers an indexed electronic version of the atlas. So if you go to the word index, you click the letter Taf, the last letter of the Jewish alphabet, you scroll down to the word Tilim Bes Medrash, Psalm Study House. And this is what you will hear. You will hear how Jewish workers were once taught basic Jewish literacy between afternoon and evening prayers.
Hatilim Bishmedrash is given was mir vielleicht Post-Arbeiter, haben nicht ganz keine Zeit zu lernen, keine Sache. Haben die gehabt, habe ich Medrash, wo die vielleicht gesagt zusammenkommen, nach der Arbeit, aber vor der Arbeit, und sagen Tilim. Und in derselben Zeit, vielleicht sie haben doch einen Mann, das vielleicht kommen und vielleicht lernen mit den Yankiv, Medrash, von die Milchemaren. In der Fahrt, das geht in der Tilim Bishmedrash.
So the destruction of the European hinterland, in other words, has turned Yiddish orality into a veritable Torah Sheba'al Peh, an oral Torah, a co-sanctified and indispensable repository of the usable European Jewish past. The Internet has completely upended the content and contexts of Yiddish orality. In retrospect, Yiddish radio was just a dry run. Now that the Internet has globalized the reach and radically eclecticized the programming of radio. No longer local, no longer limited to specific times and days of the week, no longer commodified into binary opposites, popular versus highbrow, religious versus secular. The internet traverses time and space here and there, past and present. On the internet, it isn't just preachers, politicians, professional performers, and promotional advertisers who can make their voices heard. It is anyone with a smartphone, a modicum of computer savvy, and a personal agenda. The internet has also upended the binary distinction between orality and textuality that has informed our whole discussion up until now. The operative term in the new lexicon of Yiddish studies is vernacular, with its delicious derivatives, Jeffrey Chandler's post-vernacular and Rebecca Margolis's transvernacular. Why is vernacular so much more user-friendly than orality? Because, as we have already heard, orality can be captured in a soundbite, a monologue, a ballad, a recitation, a comedy routine, or as an isolated speech genre, like a counting out rhyme or a Schulklapper's mantra. In short, as something atomized and fragmented. Whereas vernacular carries with it the promise of community. Vernacular is the lingo of the Facebook generation, for whom the virtual is real, and a chat room is better than a classroom. The last two items on our playlist, which brings us up to the present, were both made expressly for the internet, and they operate on two frequencies at once. On an oral frequency, they offer a rich menu of dialect, intonation, cultural literacy, gender, and genre. And on a vernacular frequency, they create or conjure up an audience for Yiddish listeners. Kol Haloshon is a website that operates via YouTube. Where it originates is difficult to determine, whether in Monsey, New York, Bnei Brak, Geula, Beitar Illit, or Antwerp. Nachum Strum, whoever he is one of several Hasidic rabbis who offer siches, informal talks, or shiurim, formal instruction in Jewish sacred texts, geared to men, women, or children in Yiddish, Hebrew, or English. Obviously, therefore, this kosher website is designed for internal consumption. Even as it offers a menu of other linguistic choices, Kol Haloshon helps maintain Yiddish as the unifying language of the worldwide Hasidic community and insulates them from the rest of the world. Strum himself appears on screen in standard Haredi garb, and he could be anywhere from 20 to 35 years old. Now, in this brief segment from one of his siches, Strum speaks the transnational Polish Yiddish favored by Hasidim the world over. Free of English, modern Hebrew, or other foreign loanwords, his speech is therefore universally accessible and timeless, as befits a speech genre, siches, venerated among Hasidim. Embedded within this particular inspirational talk is an even more venerable speech genre, a mushal, or parable, about two merchants who, in time of famine, tried to make a sale. One arrived in time with an all-or-nothing offer of 10 wagons for 10,000 zehuvim, gilded, 6 that were of straw and only 4 of wheat. He clinched this sale in no time. Another merchant, trying to copy his success, brought to market 10 wagons of straw for the same asking price and came up empty. The moral: he who combines Torah study with profane matters will succeed on the strength of his Torah, whilst he who is devoid of Torah will get nothing in return.
Hat man ihm gesucht am Muschel. Sie gewähnen a Hingejuhe. Ich gewähne a Seuche, was sie gewähnen, es gewollt auswahlen als ordentliche Seuche. Ich sie kommen zu der Stutt, et schuld verkäufen a Waggon von Twie, mehr wie 1000 Seiden. Hat gemacht a Kind. Kommen zu der Stutt, wie dort, sie gewähne a Hinger, zu der Land dort, sie gewähne a Hinger, sie kommen mit 10 Waggonen, 6 von Streu, 4 von Twie. Hat gesagt, ich verkaufe alle 10 für 10.000 Seiden. Also ich habe gekauft, es hat sich gelohnt, es noch gewinnt ganz billig. Später in der Stutt, was anstatt hat verzeiht, ich habe verkauft einen Waggon für Streu für 1000 Seiden. Also ich habe gehört, hat er ein paar Waggonen für Streu. Ich komme in jenes Land, will auch verkaufen für 1000 Seiden ein Waggon. Aber du, das ist sehr teuer. Aber man kann doch also verkauft nicht bekommen. Hat du, das macht dich narrisch. Da haben verkauft 10 Waggonen für 10.000 Jiden, in 4 von denen sind gewinnt von 2. Was ist geläunt? Aber die hat noch einen Streu. Hat du von der Banker. Der Reb Shimshon, hat gehabt teure, und hat gehabt, der hat Panusse, hat gedacht noch Sachen, ist mir meine so getan. Hat gehabt Schuhe von teure, wenn gekannt hat, Gesetzen gelernt, wenn gekannt hat, geholfen Jiden, in der Rest, gewinnt Sachen, was hat gemisst ihn. Aber scheint kann die es nicht gar die 2 Schuhe teure mit der Chesed, als doch gut nicht. Ich meine, von dem erkippst du Gehennen.
If you think I understood this the first and the second or third time, without a playback function, there's no way I could have even made sense of this, but that's the speed at which he speaks. So the internet is also home to a new generation of non-native Yiddish speakers who learn the language in an academic or specially incubated setting. Weiberteich is a feminist Yiddish website that went live last year right here in Tel Aviv. Its creator, Sandra Sosia Fox, opens her inaugural podcast with the Yiddish comedians Jigan and Schumacher, impersonating a husband and wife 4 years into their marriage. This allows her to both foreground the sexual politics of pre-war Yiddish humor and to spoof it. A salat hat sie gemacht, a salat! A salad is what she made for lunch. Can you imagine? A salad, screams the exasperated husband. In other words, a man in the kitchen is not even a remote possibility. The Weiberteich website is a vernacular presence based on a completely constructed orality. Addressing herself to meine Zuhörerins, my female listeners, in an accent and diction that are unabashedly American, Fox's Yiddish, while fluent, is not entirely grammatical. As Fox will later explain, had she waited to achieve perfection, the website would never have been launched. And show me a man who ever suffered such qualms. Yeah, I think she's right. So, even before she offers her personal tribute to the female vocalists who raised her feminist consciousness back in 2005, it is the hybrid nature of her speech that convinces us of her sincerity and authenticity.
Was ist das so sein getan?
Was heißt was? Aufgeräumt alle Zimmern, gewaschen Wäsch, gepresst Wäsch, ausgepitzt alle Schirr, gegangen bei Zullen dem Cheshm fin Gas, eingekäuft, in gekocht Mittag.
Ja, gekocht. Du sie ganzen? Mittag hat sie gekocht. Steht mir verdeugen der Mittag. Na, was ist das so ins gekocht auf Mittag?
Gefüllte Fisch, geachte Leber, gewickelt Kreuz, a gefüllte Katschke, Joich mit Lokschen, gebrutene Äpfel, ja, in a Salat.
A Salat hat sie gemacht. A Salat.
Shalom Aleichem, teure Zuhörers, gleich von Tel Aviv, heiße ich Sosia Fox. Ich bin die Balabusta von Weiberteich. Heint auf der Programm ist eine Reinführ, was hat nur ein Ziel. Ich will erklären, was heißt Weiberteich und wie soll ihr könnt alle anteilnehmen in dem. Lass mir anheben mit dem Schritt zurück zu 2001. Ich bin nur gewesen 12 Jahre alt, wenn mein Schwesterkind hat von mir gespielt. La Tigre, Bikini Kill und ein paar andere Musikgruppen von einer feministischen Musikbewegung, was man hat geheißen Riot Girl. Ich habe früher nicht gehört, Frauen singen mit dieser Koyach, Kavanna und politischen Bateit. Es ist wichtig, öfter zu gedenken, als ich bin aufgewachsen in den Jahren von Britney Spears und Christina Aguilera. Hit me, baby, one more time. Lucky that my breasts are small and humble, so you don't confuse them with mountains. Gedenkt man? Wenn ich habe gehört der Musik, habe ich sich verliebt. Sitzen auf dem Autobus, auf dem Weg in Schule, mit meiner herrlich spielenden Musik heuch, habe ich gekannt dergleichen in einer Welt. Ich bin geworden ein Feminist durch die Musik, gefunden sich und entdeckt mein eigenem Kohl durch die Kohles von die älteren radikalen Frauen, was haben der Musikbewegung gegründet.
So this then is where our story ends, with a new beginning. As Sholem Aleichem taught us the recitational art of the monologue, as Yiddish actors taught us to appreciate different performance styles, as Yiddish poets expanded the range of what sounds natural, as the radio became the urban, infinitely adaptable voice of Yiddish in the here and now, as ethnographic recordings and websites became the central repository of a Yiddish oral Torah, and as Hasidim and feminists have harnessed the power of the internet to sustain and expand a Yiddish vernacular presence, so must we, who work at cultural transmission, adapt our thinking and teaching to this age of digital reproduction. Am Kodosh, hallowed assembly, steht auf in gate, arise and go, lavoides haboire, to serve your sacred calling. Ki lekoch notzarti, this is why each of us has labored so long. Utsoi, lad mosoi, tishkav, get up, there's no time to lose.